Alright, now we are at the next part. Congratulations, you're almost halfway through. After you get done with this section, you'll be at the halfway mark. When you get done with this, take the midterm, and the midterm will be an inclusive from the very first video to now. The way I have the midterm set up is basically it'll be a series of questions, some multiple choice, some short essay, and from there you can take that. Now, when you get to the final, know that everything from the final to the midterm is the test. So I don't do an accumulative final from day one to the end. So I break it up in half. That should make it a little bit easier for your studying. Now, alright, so here we go. Art that in the late 30s through the 40s. Now, some of these artists I'm going to be talking about, they made their career before the 1900s, but their career really blew up in these times. And so basically the whole theory between this work, it's right before the abstract expressionist, so the Jackson Pollocks of the group. This is right in the World War I, World War II group of artists. So so anyway, I think you guys are going to like this group. You'll know most of these names. If not, have seen the art if you don't know the names. So we're going to start with the guy that you see at the bottom that looks kind of like Festus Adams in this image, and that is Pablo Picasso. Now, when you think about Pablo Picasso, everyone knows the name, but I don't think they really know who he is and what was so important about Pablo Picasso. Now, just to give you an idea, he's the first rock star artist. Everybody internationally knew Pablo Picasso, and that's what's so intriguing about him. Most artists before him, they were big names, but mostly in their country. Picasso was worldly known. Now, the one thing about Pablo Picasso, it's the amount of work this man made, it's insane. Now, am I a big fan of Picasso? Somewhat. I appreciate all the work that he did and the energy he spent, but there are some flaws with him that I'm not a big fan of. His lifestyle, definitely not a fan of, but we'll talk about that. The other thing is a lot of people think Pablo Picasso is a good person. He really, wasn't that great of a person in his life. Now, his art, he's a phenomenal artist. So we'll be talking about him. And now also notice he lived for a really ridiculously long time. So he was born in 1881 and lived to be in 1973. So that's a good stretch of time for any artist. Now, the work I'm going to be showing you, it's mostly his most popular work, but just to let you know, when he died, his net worth was $3 billion. Okay? And at that time, there was no artist at that level anywhere. So there's got to be something to be said about that. And he was very, very quite successful, but when I show you some of the videos, and I do want you to watch some of the videos, there's a video section, and I'll point it out. It's just 2 documentary sections, mostly about his family, not about the art. It's about his personality and his family. And I want you to watch those because the idea about his wives and the women that he was part of, that was part of his life, it's kind of important how he treated his children. So, and you'll see when we get there and you listen to the video. All right. So let's get into the first thing. Now, the first thing I put down is there's a movie that came out in '96, I believe. It's called Surviving Picasso, and I put it's played by Picasso's played by Anthony Hopkins, so he does a decent job. So there's a little trailer. Look at it now. It's Picasso is the main person, but it's really the story is basically about his wife and the wives that he's had. So it kind of puts a interesting light on how he treated women. And when you get to a few pieces that we get to, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, it's a great movie. Highly recommended if you get a chance to watch it. Some YouTube links out there have the whole version. You can watch that if you'd like. Makes it totally free. But it was a good movie, so check it out if you love Picasso, you'll love the movie. Okay. Now the next movie I put in here, he's got a lot of movies. I'll just warn you on that. Now this one's about a minute long, and it lets you see at the end of his life all the gallery or his studio and how many pieces he has laying around his house. Also too, he also makes a ceramic vessel for you guys that looks like a bird, which is kind of interesting watching him work and looking at him working. Now I could have pulled out the video of him drawing over and over, but it's a little redundant and kind of a boring video, and so this one, it kind of gives you a little bit of his personality at the end of his life. He's about 80 in this video, and it was done by Time Magazine, just to let you know, and we'll get into that later. But let's go into his first piece. Now, we're going to be talking about his career when he first started. Now, when he started, like most beginning artists, it takes time. And now, one of the things about Picasso, it's his ego. His ego was larger than most. Now, when you see this is a Picasso painting without an ego. All right, I want you to think about this, okay? And as you go through his work, the ego, and if you don't know what an ego is, it's your inner self, okay? It's where you think of yourself more than a subject matter. It's who you are. And so, and a lot of times he has a lot of strong personality in his work. Here, I kind of feel he's uncertain in this work, and I don't think he also found his artist voice. So, what is this painting about? Well, here are some Circus Carney kind of rejects, so to speak. And when you look at I don't know which ones they are. Like one guy might be the heaviest man. This might be the smallest couple or the youngest couple with the two kids. The bearded lady could be the lady. I don't know there. I don't know which characters are supposed to be in this painting, but definitely they have been left behind, and the circus has gone on, and they're kind of stuck in this kind of wasteland area. And I kind of feel Picasso relates to these people. He's not a very tall man by any stretch of the imagination, but he's like most kind of shorter people. They have what we call the Napoleon complex, where they feel that they're bigger than they actually are. Some of you might be short, and I don't want to offend you guys, but that is a complex that some short people have. Not every short person, but he definitely suffers from it, and so he definitely tries to be bigger than life. He's not a really short man, but he's not tall by any stretch of the imagination. And he's definitely not average. So he's a little shorter than average. Okay, but I think he relates to these people, and the way his work kind of progressed, he's kind of copying. Now you're going to also hear me use this word to describe Picasso. He's a chameleon. All right, and what does a chameleon do? It changes colors to absorb into the background. All right, it copies. Now, does he copy? No. But what he does is whatever's trending, he takes it and makes his own version of it. And is there anything wrong with that? No. I've been describing this through a lot of people's works about piggybacking. There's nothing wrong with it. But when something's trending and you hop right on and you become the first person that public sees of that, well, it gets to be a little annoying for the rest of the artists who might have even started doing it. I really don't think his artwork's voice started to become in the picture until way later, and so we'll get into that when we get to Guernica. Now, and also, I'm skipping sections. I just wanted to show you his first piece. But there was a section that came right after this. There was the what we call the Red series, and we call the Blue series. Now, the Red series was not popular by any stretch of the imagination, and his reviews on it were horrible. And he actually felt really depressed about this. His sales were low. He wasn't doing well. And but one of the things about being an artist, you have faith that you're going to be successful. And he's one of those that I feel is going to be successful. When he was younger, he knew that. Now, when I look at his Blue series, now, the Blue series was very important for Picasso. This is the first time he uses the idea of color with the idea of emotion. And he kind of put this idea behind this. Color with emotion. And he's one of the first to do it. And critics actually like the Blue series. And it's interesting what critics like and what they don't like. And when the critics liked this, he started to get his ego fed, and his ego started to grow. And now what I like about the man with guitar in this piece, he says that anybody could be this man. Okay? We could one day all be homeless. Now, when you're homeless, there's a depression there. There's no denying that. But he says, but an artist, when they're homeless, you can never lose your art, so to speak. And I agree with that. If I couldn't do something, like if I wasn't able to make any money, but I think I would still do my art. Even if it was free or on the side for people to see. To make money possibly, but that's one of the things. Here's this man with the guitar, and he's playing it. Now, besides trying to make a little money, it also feeds kind of that life back into you. When you become creative, you lose that little bit of depression that you might have. As soon as it's over, might regain again. But here, it's playing with that idea of ego. Now, because it allows you to be who you are, and for a moment you're carefree, and it takes you away. It's an escape. It lets you leave this premise where you're at the moment. Now, he kind of depicts that in this painting, and he's trying to say, no matter how bad it is, at least you have your art. And he truly believes that this man is a true artist because he loves it no matter what. And so this was one of his biggest pieces and one of his greatest pieces. And it helped him get some major stardom at this point. Now, the women that were in Picasso's life. Here they are in chronological order. Now, the very first ones, Ferdinand was basically his first love. Now, she was there at the beginning, and then Olga comes into the picture. Now, when Olga comes into the picture, it was, she had money, and she had connections. So he basically left Ferdinand for Olga. Then, just like how anything of Picasso, he could not stay with this one person very long. Now, he used Olga to get popularity into places where he couldn't get. And then as the women that were in the pictures keep going, the next three, Eva, even Gabby, at the end there, they were just kind of what I would consider like muses to him. He loved them, but he wasn't in love with them. And then Dora came into the picture. When Dora came into the picture, this is where he truly fell in love. And now he married Olga, but then he divorced her during the three women. And then Dora he married again. Now Dora loved him no matter what. Okay, she became obsessed of him at points, and but then all of a sudden this new free-spirited woman came into the picture, and Francois, when she came in. Okay, Dora was just stunning, beautiful, just a beautiful person. But Francois, she had this kind of carefree style. Was really loose with her morals in one way, but also in her personality. She could fill up a room with joy really quickly, and between those two, Dora and Francois, they knew of each other when Picasso was married to Dora, but then he left Dora and then had a child with Francois, and so when he had a child with her, he basically at that moment tied himself to her in some aspects, and they had a daughter and a son. But then Jacqueline came into the picture. Now, when Jacqueline came into the picture, he never married her, but he wanted to. And she didn't want to get married. The age difference between them was quite large. Francois was a little bit older than Jacqueline, but not by much. And Dora, I think, warned Jacqueline, don't marry him, and don't have a child by him. And he wanted to have a child with her. Now, in the same time, with Francois, while they were dating, she had her third child. So it kind of gives you a picture of how his life is going. And when Francois noticed that Jacqueline became more and more in the scene, she divorced him. She left him. And then Jacqueline, she actually left him to live with Matisse at the end. And his biggest fear, I truly believe, is to die alone and just to die. He did not want to die. He was one of those people that wanted to live forever. And I think his ego kind of told him he could. And then the truth is he did die alone. And it's, he had these great women, especially the last three in his life, and any of those women would have been with him to the end if he was truly just faithful. That's all he had to be. But that's not Picasso's way. So here's some couple pictures of him with his wives. So here he is with Olga. But then here, okay, so here's the Weeping Women series, okay? Now, here's Francois, okay, weeping over Picasso, all right? Here she is again, okay? And so I don't know. I mean, I guess Francois's got thick skin over time and has learned to accept this. But any Picasso painting that had her in it, he took her out, darkened out the figures when they were going through their divorce. I like what she said. He can only be faithful to his art, and so. And there's a little video down below where she talks about it. And here she is again. Okay. Now you can even see in this picture by Time Magazine. Usually Time Magazine has a close-up of Picasso's face. But here's Francois, and she's down at the bottom of the picture. And And so you can even tell there's tension in this photograph. But then, okay, so look at Jacqueline. Here she is with him, and he wanted to marry her. But I put down wife, but truly they're not married. If they did, I might have gotten that wrong. But I believe they never married. Now, you can see in this picture exactly, he was infatuated with her. He loved her. And I think it was mostly about that passion that they had. But she came from wealth, and she also had a grandmother that was very wealthy and basically said, what are you doing with this man? And she was basically saying that she was using Picasso because she was an artist and wanted to get popularity. And did she? Definitely. There's no denying that. And as a woman artist, there was no way to get through doors, and this was one way to get through doors. Now I have down Picasso's family life, and there's a video down below, and it talks about him and his son. It's kind of cruel. I will say how he looks at his son through his eyes. He even says in the video to somebody, he says, how can I have a son just like that? How can I be Picasso and have a son like that? And he basically thought his son was lazy as he got older. And I don't know. I mean, I have kids. I would never say anything like that about my children. Now, of course, they're older, but I mean, in the video, but I still don't think I would ever say anything like that. So in this little portion, watch it. It's about 10 minutes, each one of those videos, but it's important. And notice that I don't have the video link to box to it. For some reason, they wouldn't let me share the encrypted file, so you have to click on the link, okay, to watch it. PBS is sometimes like that. All right, so let's go to the next one. Surviving Picasso, it's a trailer. That's when I click on it for my class, so skip through. Now, here is a matador. Now, there's pictures of Picasso where he believes he's a matador, and he's older, but he's wearing the costume of it. I think that's his dream job. If he wasn't an artist, I think he would have loved to have been a matador. He's from Spain, all right? And one of the things in Spain that's really popular is the running of the bulls, also matador fights. And so bullfighting is a big part of their culture. And so for him, he thinks of himself, as the bull. And he did many pieces of Tauruses where it's part man, part bull, okay? And he loved that idea of if you could be an animal, what animal would you be? And for him, it's the bull, something that's masculine. Okay, again, very egocentric. All right, but he also liked the idea of the man taking down the bull. He thought there was nothing more masculine than a man taking down a bull. Now, if you've ever seen a bull fight, they're very gruesome, very bloody. Might be not what you like, but for some of you might enjoy it. So you can Google search and check out one if you've never seen one. But I will warn you, they are very violent, and the animal does die. That's the purpose. Now, okay. I showed you this piece in pop art, all right, and when we talked about Roy Lichtenstein. Now, here it comes back again. Now, this is Picasso's breaking down of the bull. In this video, we're going to also be seeing the artist Monet. Not Monet. Matisse. No, Matisse, yes. But Mondrian, sorry. Pete Mondrian. Now, you got to understand, Clement Greenberg is a major critic at this point, and when this was made. And Clement Greenberg, in 1940-ish, is just doing glowing reviews on Mondrian, on Mondrian, and now Picasso's getting upset about this because for decades, critics like Greenberg. And you're going to hear that name a lot in this lesson plan, so write down the name. And I even have a video about Greenberg. I even have a video with Greenberg talking in this section. So make sure you write his name down. He's very important. All right. Now, with Clement Greenberg writing wonderful reviews about Mondrian, Picasso gets jealous. All right, and so he does a version. So he does what we talk. If you remember us talking about the caveman and technology of art, okay, he does a caveman's basically look at a bull. Okay, and then he does his version down below. Okay, then he breaks it down into cubist forms. All right. He believes he's the king of Cubism. Just to let you know this, and Mondrian believes he's the king of Cubism, but Mondrian actually doesn't feel like he even has a say in this because Picasso's technically done a little bit longer, but and then he keeps breaking it down till it's a stick figure at the bottom. Okay, and what his remark to this is, see, this is easy to break down an object to the simplest form. Well, Mondrian saw the piece, understood the piece, and he basically shows Picasso how he could take it and break it down even further, which then crushes this whole idea of that this is easy and breaking it down even further. And Clement Greenberg loves this. He loves this fight because Picasso's the Goliath and Mondrian's the David. And as you know the story, David wins at the end. And Clement Greenberg lets Picasso know that you're not going to win this fight, and he was right. And so when we get to Mondrian, you'll see, and this piece will again come up. So I guarantee you, make sure you write down everything I just said because that's important. So here now, Guernica. Okay, now what is this about? Okay, it's right in the middle between World War I and World War II. Okay, and there's a civil war in Spain, and this was a very traumatic time. Innocent people were dying. They were in the process of using World War I and World War II styles of attacks and military grade bombs, and so here is a very traumatic scene. Now, Guernica is a huge painting in any stretch of the imagination. It is, I would guesstimate, about 30 feet long by 20 feet high. I'd say less than that, 15 feet high. About 15 by 20, or maybe 30. It's huge. And because most painters at this time did small pieces and or average size pieces that would fit your wall, and here he wanted to get this message out, and so he basically wanted the world to know about the civil war that was going on in Spain, and and I think it was kind of the start of knowledge about the idea of World War II. Okay, now here we have kind of like it's supposed to be an abstract version of a town. You see a man burning on the right. You hear screams echoing in the distance. You have a woman down at the bottom of the right side, and she's carrying a leg, and this is a leg of her loved one. Okay, and then you have these horses trampling on top of the guards. Whenever a major situation like this, where there was fires and everything, you got to understand there was hardly any automobiles at this time, especially in small little towns, and so majority of the time there was horses stampeding. It would hurt the civilians more and the livestock than actual soldiers, so to speak, and you can even see the soldier who's being crushed by this horse at the bottom. But the strongest person in this piece is the lady on the left, okay? And she's holding her dead child, okay? Now, this was shown to America, and it is in the Metropolitan Museum's permanent collection. It's actually one of the first pieces when you walk into the museum, what you see. And what it's basically is talking about the violence of war, and it's important that people always remember how violent war is. Some people are for war, some people are against war. He was definitely against the idea of war. But he is also a communist, part of the Communist Party. He was actually part of any party that was winning at the time. So, but he leaned towards the Communism Party. Now, when you look at the lady screaming, now our president at the time, Roosevelt, when he saw this, he didn't understand it. And when someone told him about what's going on, and this piece was first shipped to the White House to show America what's going on, and it was right before Pearl Harbor. He looked at this piece and he said, I don't understand it, but I can really feel the emotion of that mother screaming. And I know that she's not screaming, but I can actually feel it screaming out of the canvas. And that's saying something. She's a cartoon kind of a form, all right? And I sometimes believe cartoons can have a stronger message than an actual photograph at times. And this is one of those examples of that. Now, also, if you're a fan of the Disney show Phineas and Ferb, I watched a documentary once, and they said where did they get their ideas for their characters. And one of the directors and the creators of the show, he says he's a huge Picasso fan, and he took Phineas from Guernica, from the mother with her child, and so that's where Phineas came from. Just to let you know. So, little backstory on that. I put out a 3D video. It's mostly for effects. You don't have to watch it, but if you want to, it's kind of a neat little video. It's nothing important, though. I thought it was kind of neat. Kind of lets you zoom in on some of the characters there a little bit better. Now, here, okay, is part of his Cubist phase. Again, like I said, is a chameleon, all right? The Guernica is what I consider his true identity as an artist at that time. Here, he's copying many artists of popularity at the time, especially Mondrian, okay? Now, what is he doing? And Mondrian was copying too, so don't get me wrong on that, okay? Everyone was pretty much copying Cubists for a little while. Now, one of the things about Cubists that are interesting is their color palette is a very earthy tone color palette. The first piece you see on the left is Man with Guitar, and the second piece on the right is Lady with Mandolin. Okay, you can definitely tell that she's a lady. You can kind of see from her 1920s kind of hairstyle with that kind of flow on the face. You can tell she's also a woman by her chest. You can see her breast on one side of her body. The instrument is easy to understand. Now the one on the right is a little bit more jagged and a little bit harder to see. The face is a little bit more broken down. And I want you to think about this. Imagine if you had a six-sided paper dice, okay? And you took that square, that little cube, and you smashed it down, okay? And when you smash that cube, whatever flat pieces pop out is what you see as the piece, okay? As for the angles, okay? Cubist is kind of doing that. Is what they're doing is they're taking a three-dimensional object and smashed it down. Not every time it works and fills in the form. Sometimes the more abstract it got, the better people liked it. Sometimes if it was too realistic, people didn't like it. Okay. Same kind of thing happens here. With his portrait of his art dealer. Okay. Now, one of the things I thought was interesting was what he said. He's done a couple portraits of him, but one of his first portraits of him, he actually asked him to do a portrait of him. Now, some of them are more realistic looking, some of them more cubist. He did not like the cubist ones. He pointed out that, and he said, even with the cubists, he said, I want it to be recognizable. I want people to know who that is. I want them to know it's me. And Picasso's response was, well, you'll just turn around and sell it, so why should I even do a piece of you? And he said to Picasso he would never sell any of his portraits that were given to him. And it was true. Until he died, his family actually sold it to the museums. But what I find is kind of interesting is when he got angry with him, he said, look, you've done every pretty woman you've ever seen, but you've never done a piece of me. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, speaking of pretty women, we have Demon Lizelle of Aragon. Sorry, I had to get a drink. Now, I wanted you to look at these, okay, for a minute. There's two things that are important with this, and I'm going to put this in a question for sure. Okay, so when you look at this piece, what is going on? Well, it's 5 women in a pose. That's pretty simple right there. Now, what is he trying to do with these 5 women? Well, first of all, these are prostitutes, okay, and he's at a brothel, all right. Now, he's kind of copying Manet. Now, Manet would hire prostitutes, and he would paint them like Luncheon on the Grass or Olympia, okay, and he would put those women in a scene. Now, Picasso's doing the opposite. He's going into the brothel with his canvas and posing them right there and painting them. Well, and what he wanted is he wanted to shock the art world, okay, by going to the brothel and painting them. Now, the interesting thing, the difference between Olympia and all those other pieces is about 40 years. Now, I want you to think about this, okay? If you think about today, it's, 2016, almost 17, and if you go back 40 years, okay, TV shows are really different than they were back then. If you think about certain shows that were 40 years ago in the 70s, they're very different than they are now. But 70s was pushing it. So let's go back to the 50s, okay, where I think they really are exaggerated in TV shows. If you think about the 50s, let's go with a popular one that most of you have seen is I Love Lucy, okay? If you think about Desi Arnaz and Lucy Ball, they never slept in the same bed together, all right? And when the show, the Dick Van Dyke Show came out, and him and his wife slept in the same bed, that was huge. That was major controversy, okay? And that was a show that was in the 60s. Now you look at shows where married people are sleeping together, and we don't think a second about it. We're like, yes, that's even unmarried people, and we don't even think about it and care about it as well. But back in the 50s, that was a huge deal. You couldn't even show a bathroom in the TV shows back in the 50s. And today, you see people brushing their teeth, sometimes using the restroom, taking showers. And so that would have been a major faux pas. So when this piece was shown to the museums, it was accepted. Everybody loved it, and everyone thought it was great. And Picasso got kind of a glowing nod, and even critics like Clement Greenberg were excited about the piece. And I think a few things. A, it's cubist, so it loses some of its sexuality, okay, because they're simple shapes, all right. And the second thing is, I think people have accepted prostitutes for being art subjects at this point, okay. So Manet, he kind of broke the barriers, all right, that allowed Picasso to make this without any harm done to him. And so it's kind of got the negative response that he wanted. Now, there's another thing too. There's 2 twin girls, okay, and we know in history that these are 2 of his muses, and he's used them a lot in his paintings. But now there's 3 other women, okay, that are kind of on the sides of the twins. Now, when you look at the 3, they're wearing these kind of masks. Now, in your book, if you get the Living with Art, even in art forms, they both depict that the masks that they are wearing are African masks. Okay? Well, this is where I differ from that. I believe they're wearing Indonesian masks. Now, how do I know this? Well, if you go to the Dallas Museum of Art, the African exhibit has masks, and the noses and the faces and the eyes are very different than the masks you're seeing right here. 2 of the masks on the right definitely feel Indonesian, where they have this kind of alien almond-shaped heads. And if you look at the masks in the Indonesian side, they're made out of porcelain or earthenware clay, which is kind of a brownish clay or white clay. Okay, and she's wearing a white mask at the top and earthenware at the bottom. But also notice the nose; it's really elongated with a little tiny dot of a mouth, and then it's got these almond-shaped eyes, almost alien in some aspects. And he actually, in a video, in a documentary, he even talks about Indonesian masks. And when you look at some of his art collection that he has in his house, in his studio, in the villa that he lives in, there are tons of Indonesian masks on the wall. So this tells me one thing, that he's using Indonesian masks, not African masks. The brothels have been accepted at this point, so he's not shocking the world. People in time have evolved, and anything that Picasso does at this point is pretty much accepted too. So that's just a little thinking. All right, now I put this in here because this is a fun little video. If you've never seen these people's videos, they have a whole series of them. Highly recommend you check out the one where it's Picasso versus Bob Ross. I think it's pretty funny. And if you don't know who Bob Ross is, he was a guy on PBS that did these kind of wonderful paintings of landscapes. And I think it's kind of a funny scene. So click on the video, get a good laugh. There won't be any tests on it. It's just for you guys' enjoyment. Now, here's one of the artist's cars that's replicated like Picasso's style. It's not Picasso's car in any stretch of the imagination. It's just in his style. Okay. And here's another one of Andy Warhol's car we talked about. So it's kind of a reference to that. There was these kind of rogue cars that were made after Andy Warhol's car was made. And I also have at the bottom here a video of all the history of these cars from BMW. Now, that being said, the guy who's talking about the cars, he's missing some of the cars that were not done by BMW. But the BMW cars are all inside that video, which it's got a good kind of lineage, and I kind of thought it would be good to put it in there. So it's at the very bottom of the feed. So click on it if you want to see the history of the art cars, and some of them are really cool if you haven't seen them yet. Okay. All right. Now, looking at this. This is one of Picasso's sculptures. Now, Picasso did not limit himself to doing just paintings. He did sculpture, he did pottery, he did every kind of art form except photography. I don't think he took pictures, but he wasn't using them as an art form. He did collage. You name it. Pretty much he believed an artist should be able to know how to do all types of art. But this is going to be something that's interesting. When we get into sculpture, this head's going to pop back up again. Now, this is a Japanese woman. It's a Geisha woman. And him and Henri Matisse, that's the next artist coming up, they truly had this affair. They were infatuated with these Japanese women. Now, with these Japanese women, they thought they were like the ideal woman. Their servitude towards a man. They were in the brothel kind of a feel. So they were ideal women in their repertoire of artists, and they were exotic. And so now these heads you're seeing, this is probably Picasso's best one that I'm showing, but each year one artist would do, or each time one artist would finish a torso or a head or bust, of a Japanese Geisha, the other artist would try to one-up it. And so they battled for about 20 years back and forth, and there's about 23 heads of these heads, but there's a difference. There's one artist, Henri Matisse had a teacher, and so did Picasso. And Henri Matisse's teacher is much better than Picasso's, and he's kind of jealous and bitter about it. So you'll see that when we get to the sculpture section, because Henri Matisse's teacher is the person that I'm talking about. Speaking of him, here he is. Now, Henri Matisse. Now, Matisse and Picasso. All right. This is how I explain them, make it as easy as possible. They were best friends. They were enemies. Okay, they needed each other to push each other. Now Picasso is a lot younger than Matisse, and he lived and Picasso lived a lot longer than Matisse, but but there's something about Matisse where they like to fight each other. They like to talk at each other. They felt like they were equals to each other as they became popular. Actually, I think Henri Matisse actually felt he was better than Picasso in many ways because his career started before Picasso. And the one thing is they constantly fought back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the one thing I like about Henri Matisse is he kept reinventing his image and who he is as an artist. And it's really quite interesting listening to the way he does his work versus how Picasso does his work. They're both in the same idea that they love women. They both idolize women, but there's something a little bit more romantic about Matisse versus Picasso. Speaking in that, here's Francois, okay, on Matisse talking about now. She loved Matisse, okay? But you remember I said Jacqueline left Picasso for Matisse, okay? And so did Francois at one point, okay? So there's some bitterness there. So like I said, they're enemies. Now, I don't think Francois meant to hurt Picasso so badly, but I think when she went to be with Matisse, it really I think that's when he started blacking her out of every painting he had of her in it. So click on the video, listen to how she talks. She adores him. You listen to her talk about Picasso in the early videos, she has a just this disdain about him. Now here's one of his pieces, The Joy of Life. All right. Now this is through the eyes of a man. All right. Basically, this is a man's version of heaven. Now it's nothing but women. There's no men in the image, and here women are naked and free. Now notice the shape. Look for the visual flow. Do you see the triangle from the sky working down to the ground? Okay. Now notice, if you remember Luncheon on the Green, he is straight out piggybacking off of Manet's Luncheon on the Grass, okay? And so he is basically making his own version, and it's very colorful, very loose, okay? But instead of there being two men in Manet's version, here he's doing his version where it's all women, and it's overly sexualized in some aspects. You even see two women kissing in the foreground at the bottom on the right side, and this was a very controversial piece when it was made. The Dance, okay, is a super popular piece. Now, when this was debuted, it was loved. Clement Greenberg loved both of these pieces, by the way. Thought they were exquisite. We're going to be the part of the history of art that will always be captivated and seen. Now, one of the things about Matisse's work, he takes forms to their simplest shape, and he builds out these structures that they're recognizable, but they're sensualized at the same time. And he also tries to give this carefree manner and notion in their work, in the imagery. Now, when Picasso saw this piece, he gave his opinion on it, and when he gave his opinion on it, he said, "I thought this was one of the worst pieces he've ever made." He says it looks like the form has no structure and no bones, and they feel like they're made out of rubber. I agree with that, but there is something about that is kind of nice. It's kind of got this weird kind of circle. And then now, in the also, this is one of his more later pieces, and what I think is kind of interesting is when the 1960s hippies kind of people group, when they saw these artworks, they kind of made this their movement, kind of the style. And if you've ever seen anything that has to do with a peace rally or a hippie rally, they do these large circle dances. Now, when you see these large circle dances, it is almost a replication of a Matisse painting. Matisse was highly loved during the 60s. He died in the 50s, so I think his death was something that was brought to these people, that generation of the baby boom generation, and more people, I believe, in the baby boom generation love Matisse than they love Picasso. And I think the later generations loved Picasso a little more because he outlived him a little bit. And when he died in the 80s, it was really, or 70s, sorry, it was something that they remember, okay, of a great artist falling. Now this is called the Red Studio. Now this is a piece made only for Picasso. This is to tell Picasso, look, this is the work I am working on. And if you want to compete against me, these are what you have to make. Now, at the bottom on the foreground, notice that there's a white plate. This is talking about pottery. The moment Picasso saw this piece, he knew he had to do pottery. Then there's another piece over in the background, okay? Now, if you notice that piece in the background, it's one of the heads that I talked about. And he's basically telling Picasso, look, I'm doing a head out of marble. If you want to copy me, you better start chiseling out a piece of stone and start getting that shape out. Okay? So he's kind of poking fun at him. The other thing is, notice that there's 3 paintings in here with the color pink in it. Okay? Picasso came out with a phrase that he used, and talking about Kandinsky, which he's one of the last artists I'll be talking about. He was bashing Kandinsky, which Kandinsky didn't even consider Picasso a threat because their work is so different. But he said that artists that deal with the color pink are weak and unmasculine artists, which Kandinsky is one of the most masculine artists we've ever had, and so it's just a way he could get under someone's skin. So here, of course, Matisse reads that and starts making pink paintings and says, all right, you better copy me if you want to keep up with me. And so again, he's kind of slapping him in the face with this painting. And it worked. It really got under Picasso's skin, and he had to change his style quickly. Now, also, I want you to notice in the background, on the top right, okay, if you remember Paul Gauguin, that when we talked about Vincent van Gogh's best friend, a lot of his work, he references Paul Gauguin's work, and he uses Paul Gauguin style in a lot of his paintings. And I'm going to go back in a minute and show you a quick reference. Now, he owned one of Paul Gauguin's paintings in his studio, and he's showing you here in this painting his reference towards that. But here is one of his copies of kind of like a Matisse kind of a style, or not Matisse, a Monet kind of the water kind of a style, but notice it's all in pink tones. Okay, this is looking straight out of his living room. It's a small painting, but again, he's trying to show Picasso, look, I'm making pink paintings, but I'm using the style of Monet in the water. So here now, Desert Harmony in red. Okay, here he's copying he's copying Paul Cézanne with the fruit. He's copying Paul Gauguin, okay, and he's also copying Seurat with the little pixelated dots in the background. All right. So in this painting, okay, he's copying 3 artists in one. And is that okay? Sure. It doesn't look like their artwork, okay, but it's all in his style, but it's a similar style. Now, I have here a picture, okay? So when you look at these 2 pictures of Paul Gauguin's work, you see the flowery background behind his lovely bride, okay? And then you also, if you remember me talking about his sister's floral pattern on her dress. But notice also in the background, see that water line in the background between the island and the beach? Okay, that's another thing he's copying. So when we go back to the Joy of Life, you can see the water line, right? Okay, that I'm just talking about. So again, he's copying two artists. He's not just copying Manet, he's also copying Paul Gauguin. Okay. But in Desert Harmony, you can see here he's copying the background colors of Gauguin with the way that the tablecloth goes into the wall. Same thing like in Paul Gauguin's, where the pattern goes onto the chair and the wall. Okay, so you can see right here. Now, here we go with his portrait of Madame. Now, this is a French woman, but painted to look like a Japanese geisha, okay? And this is the starting of all the heads, okay, that you see. Now, some people, to help you remember it, I always remember it as the green line painting, but this was the start of the whole Japanese culture pieces. This piece started, then the head started forming. Henri Matisse immediately made a head bust, and then Picasso shortly followed that. But it came from reference from this painting. Now here I have his blue nude. Now everything about this painting is so interesting. There's tons of articles about this painting. What is this painting truly about? For me, it's about him getting angry at Picasso. It's called Blue Nude to kind of attack his Picasso's blue series, and he's basically trying to say, I'm better than you. But at the same time, Picasso comes back and says about Matisse's piece, he said this is one of the ugliest paintings he's ever seen and the most beautiful painting he's ever seen. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, what he means by it is that the woman, there's parts of her that is so wrong, but there's also parts of her that is so interesting that to look at that it's beautiful. It's like saying it's something so ugly that it turns beautiful before your eyes. Now, what is wrong with it, you might be asking some of you, if you don't see it already. Well, first of all, the muscle tone in the arms. Let's start from head to toe. Muscle tone in the arms are more masculine than they are feminine. There's no denying that. You're looking at the hair. The hair is kind of short. She's wearing a little bun, so it's hard to tell. It gives them kind of a masculine feel. The breasts are not hanging correctly. They almost feel like they're fake. They're siliconed. Okay, the position of the body, the breast should be leaning towards the other breast a little closer. Instead, it's kind of falling back, and you can even tell he had a little bit of trouble with the breast, as you see that blue line there where he's trying to adjust it. I'm going to actually show you what this model looks like. She does not look this muscular, and a couple slides from now. Now, looking down the stomach feels okay, and the thigh feels okay, but then you get up into that hip. Okay, see where the rib cage dips down and then the hip begins? Now, that is not natural to any female form. Women have what we call a soft curve, and Georgia O'Keeffe really puts a big emphasis on that in her work. And here you can see how the rib cage should kind of line up to the hip, and it should be a nice soft line, almost like if you're thinking like a sports car. Okay, how the wheel wells come from the back to the front of the wheels, where it kind of has a soft line in like a lot of fancy sports cars like a Corvette. Okay, and so here it's totally missing that. And then you get down to the back side of her buttocks. Now, when you get to her buttocks, it's drooping. Okay, and again, women's do not do this. Okay, and here, okay, I think that's just a flaw that he's having. He's just being too loose and not enough on the structure. And then you go down to the feet, and the feet are gigantic for the body. So when Picasso was saying it's so beautiful but so ugly at the same time. This is what he's talking about. It grabs your attention, but at the same time, there's a lot of things wrong with it that make you focus on it. And when I first time saw this piece, I was expecting it to be this bright and vibrant. I've adjusted it so it looks this bright for you, but when I saw it, it was quite darker, and I was actually shocked the first time I saw this piece. Now, here is a video of Matisse, and he's going to be working his paper series. Click on the video. It's about 4 minutes. It's a great little video, and it really kind of depicts about him reinventing himself. Now here's another piece called it's called Blue Nude, just like the other one. Now see, now looking at this one, okay, this one is a lot quicker. He cut it out faster. He didn't overthink it, and it actually looks more feminine than the other Blue Nude that you saw. And for me, I think one of the things was when he works fast, his brain doesn't interact too much with his ability, and his natural talent comes out. And I always tell students a lot of times when they're working, sometimes you need to shut off your brain and just make art. And here's one of those examples where it feels more feminine. It's still very abstract, but it feels more feminine than the other one, right? So also here, when you look at, now here's the model, okay, and the drawing he's working on is in his lap, and this is the drawing itself. Now, when you look at the model, okay, she does not look like a man, does she? But in the drawing he did, it looks overly masculine. Now, this is what I'm talking about. He overthinks the drawing. And first of all, he's known for getting right up onto the model. And this is, to me, is a bad habit to do, because your head moves too much to get the shape of the figure. You should be a good set ways away from the figure when you're drawing the human form. Now, I teach life drawing, and I teach a lot of different tricks. And if I would have saw him drawing in my class, I would have said, you can draw, but you got some bad habits. And here are some of those exaggerations. You can even see it in the hip. See how he doesn't have that soft curve. You can see in the muscle tone in the arms. It doesn't feel like a feminine form. It feels overly masculine. And does she look like that? No, she doesn't look anything like that. Okay. Now here are some of his drawings that he did for a friend who was a poet writer. And so inside the poetry book, it has a lot of his illustrations. Again, looking at these illustrations, these are quick illustrations, and the drawings look more feminine than masculine. He only has a few parts that are quite wrong. If you look at the bicep on her, if he would have brought that line down maybe about 3 inches, it would have been more feminine. But instead, he brought it all the way up almost into the shoulder, and that line feels a little bit masculine. Okay. Here are some of his quick sketches. Every artist in my class, every class you do a quick warm-up. And why do you do this? This helps break the hand and eye coordination. It helps build that eye-hand coordination, and it also helps shut off your brain. Your brain is your worst enemy when you draw. Okay, it's best to shut down your brain, and by doing little tricks and little warm-ups, it actually helps connect your eyes and your hands together, so what you see is what you draw. Alright, so here is one of the next pieces that I really love of his cutout series. Now, a lot of people, when they see this, okay, they think immediately of tiles for kitchens or stained glass windows. Well, what this is technically for, it's for stained glass windows. Now, he cut out these shapes, and this piece is about 4 foot. No, I'd say it's a little bigger than that. I'd say maybe 8 foot by 8 foot. It's a big piece. So he cut out these big shapes, glued them down, and then from there, people have replicated this into a lot of stained glass windows. Even Tiffany's Glass did something about this with this piece as well, and a few of his others. Now, who is he copying here? Okay, well, at first, if you look at it, it's kind of abstract. But who's he copying? Well, he's copying Monet's water lilies. Okay, this is the tail end of his life. And so he's doing these water lilies just like Monet was doing his water lilies. Okay, and so these are big cutouts. And so he's kind of referring to that time period. He's trying to reinvent himself in a lot of ways, but in this, I think he could do. He started doing that, and these cutouts, are something that you think about what kids do. And here he is cutting out these shapes and saying it's art, and truth is, the critics loved it, and to me, this is one of my favorite pieces by Matisse. They did prints of his series. I'm not a big fan of his prints. They took his cutouts and replicated his cutouts and printed them. I'm not a big fan. I don't know who printed them, but I think they could have been done better. Now here, okay, if you remember when we were talking about Keith Haring and some of his shapes, if you think that Keith Haring probably looked at this piece and studied and thought about his shapes with that, you'd be correct. Keith Haring came out and said, talking about Matisse's forms and shapes became one of his ideas behind a lot of his street art. And this is one of his more recognizable cutout pieces. Here he is also doing this is a chapel he did, and I love that he didn't want to get on a ladder and accidentally fall and hurt himself. So here he's standing next to his mural with a long stick drawn with a big piece of charcoal tape to it, and the skill level on that is just amazing. And so, as soon as he got done with it, then the painters would come back in and fill in the lines. And if you look right here, this is the final bit of his chapel. All right. Now, a lot of people speculated when he did his chapel, who is the person there behind the altar? Well, a lot of people who paid him were very upset with this because he said the person is whoever you want it to be. Okay, he says this is a chapel, even though it's set up for a Christian chapel or a Catholic chapel. He said, but other people come to chapels to pray as well, and so he thought whoever that mystery person could be would be someone that you're praying to. So it could be if you're Jewish, it could be Abraham. All right. If you're Catholic, it could be Jesus. It could be God. It could be anybody or a saint that you're wanting to pray to. If you're Hindu, it could be to their gods. And so that's what he was doing with this. And the church didn't like it at first, but then they accepted it at the end, and he died shortly after it. So they kind of went, all right, we'll keep it. So, and this is a little chapel outside of France. It's not too far. It's about a 20-minute drive south of France. All right, and we're going to stop right here, and I'm going to make a part 2 at this point, okay? And we're going to pick up with Salvador Dali, all right? I've done a little over an hour, so we'll put this in as part 1, and then we'll get into part 2.